And so, with her mandate systematically dismantled, Liz then resigned outside Downing Street on the 20th of October 2022, just 45 days after taking office and 3 days after all of her policies were reversed here. It was after she lost a vote on fracking, which would have reduced energy bills. Her party stabbed her in the back to the very end. Heal notes, in Out of the Blue, that before Hunt had delivered this statement, that evening, as Hunt planned his speech to announce the U-turn, the following day, the first Tory MPs went public with calls for Truss to go. Crispin Blunt, Andrew Bridgen, Jamie Wallace. All of these people are no longer MPs. Andrew Bridgen we've had in here. But Crispin Blunt and Jamie Wallace was the quote-unquote first trans MP who had been found fleeing the scene of a car crash, cross-dressing after having an illicit gay affair. Crispin Blunt was thrown out of the party as an MP for being investigated for, I believe it was sexual assault. I don't know the outcome of that investigation, but I do know that he once grabbed a young fellow by the lapels at 2022 Conservative Party conference and shouted in his face about immigration rather aggressively. So he doesn't seem like the most upstanding character. So just interesting that the first people out for blood were no longer MPs, no longer in the party, and have been plagued by sex scandals. So it's absolutely nothing to do with the rumours of the fever parties run by CCHQ Central Office and Dougie Smith, which you can look into, because it's just all on the internet. Absolutely nothing. Not the only MPs and Downing Street figures that are working against her, by the way. Remember, the third claim. We're going to get around to this now. Liz said that there were leaked briefings by Conservative MPs and civil servants. Now, Liz, this is recent, wrote a letter to Cabinet Secretary Simon Case about the civil service breaching impartiality rules. Story is on this, that in July's King's Speech, after the Labour government took power, there were briefing notes that the civil service had used to summarise what the government was going to do. And Liz writes in here, "It's been brought to my attention the King's Speech background briefing notes published today and available online contain repeated references personally to me and actions undertaken by my government in the context of a political attack. Not only is what's stated in the document untrue, making no reference to the LDI crisis precipitated by the Bank of England's regulatory failures, but I regard it as a flagrant breach of the Civil Service Code, since such personal and political attacks have no place in a document prepared by civil servants. An error made all the more egregious when the attack is allowed to masquerade in the document among, quote, key facts. Will you please urgently investigate how such material came to be included in the document, ensure suitable admonishment for those responsible, and the immediate removal of such political material from the version of the document on gov.uk." And we know from Steve Edgington's various exposés on the civil service, my relentless coverage of it over here anytime news comes out, looking into how the Home Office and Raiku and Prevent operate, this institution is profoundly captured by ideologues who despise the British public and don't want to see more money in their pocket, but does want to see more money going to hostile foreign nationals that they import against our express wishes in every single election and referendum. And so, it's unsurprising that hostile language against Liz Truss ended up in this briefing document. The notes of the briefing document read that Truss's government was, quote, a lesson in not how to do fiscal policy, and that measures to give more power to the Office for Budget Responsibility were necessary to, quote, ensure that the mistakes of Liz Truss's mini-budget cannot be repeated. They also called the mini-budget disastrous, similar language that we used editorially in other press outlets. Reminder, the Civil Service Code, not that it's ever enforced, says officials must maintain, quote, political impartiality and cannot use resources for, quote, party political purposes. Now, these are never followed in de facto fashion, as the exposés have shown. But the result of Liz Truss's complaints were that the language was removed from the briefing document. Now, I have heard that Liz still hasn't received an apology. She still doesn't know why this is included in the first place. There's been no investigation, and none of the civil servants have been punished for doing this, for breaching the code. But a Cabinet Office spokesperson has said to The Independent, quote, the Cabinet Secretary, Simon Case, has responded to Liz Truss and directed for these references to be removed from the document. They have now been corrected and updated. Now, I won't hold my breath for Liz getting any transparency or an apology over this, because Simon Case authored the letter that was the nail in the coffin for Liz Truss's government. This was leaked as well. All these things keep getting leaked, right? Very suspicious. It was Case who ensured Truss's resignation, and this was first published by James Heal, the author of her unauthorised biography, in The Spectator. And The Spectator, again, now run by Michael Gove, formerly by Fraser Nelson, a very suspicious outlet who are very on side of the pro-mass migration, One Nation Tories, and Kemi Badenoch. one of Liz Truss's former leadership rivals, Kemi Badenoch, being very connected to the same people who are backing Rishi Sunak's campaign. Think Munira Mirza, Dougie Smith, and the like. He all wrote in The Spectator, quote, "I understand that last year it was Simon Case, the head of the civil service, who wrote Liz Truss a memo telling her to abandon her economic agenda on the grounds that it was causing market chaos. From that moment, her premiership was doomed." Now this is mad, because in 10 Years to Save the West, Truss said that Simon Case was present at Chevening in August when the growth plan was being written. So Simon Case knew all of the intricate details of Truss's plan ahead of time, allowed her to press on with it, would have presumably known that this couldn't have possibly caused the market upset, and it must have been Bank of England policy beyond her control, and yet still went ahead with pressuring her to leave. And that he was most at fault for this. Now, a source cited in Nadine Dorries' book, The Plot, and again, take Nadine Dorries with a pillar of salt because she has a penchant for strange interviews, dodgy TikToks, and threatening Jimmy Carr with being locked up for making offensive jokes. But in this, she cites a few sources. In The Plot, she says, "Did Liz have any direct interactions with them?" And her source says, "Liz didn't get on with Gove, and she had run-ins with Robbie Gibb in the past under May. He was a number 10 head of comms, worked at the BBC, involved with what Dorries calls the movement, this group within CCHQ. Apparently Liz could see right through them. She is a sort of no bullshit person. She got the nickname Human Hand Grenade from Dominic Cummings for a reason, right? You know the reputation of Gove can never be impunged in the media, right? The biggest leaker in cabinet. In the end, the letter Simon Case sent to her was what ended it all, but of course, as these guys do, he sent a letter to Liz, but it was leaked to the media, and by the time that she read it, she knew she had been bounced. So it was leaked to the media, Spectator, specifically, and Gove is now the editor of The Spectator. Bit weird that, isn't it? If anyone thinks Liz wasn't done over, they're delusional. She's a lesson in how they operate. If you aren't part of their network, you will not survive. In the letter, he repeated the Bank of England view: you cannot cancel the increase in corporation tax from 20 to 25%, and you cannot reduce the upper band of tax. And of course, it was too late. The narrative of a U-turn on the substance of her budget was already running riot down Fleet Street. It was over. Liz said to me once, that lot, they are the 30-year fault line of the Conservative Party. So the same people in CCHQ, the same civil servants, the same Conservative Party MPs, the same corrupt nexus which lost them the election, which removed Boris Johnson, which installed Rishi Sunak against the will of the members, and which is currently, now, I think, engaged in an enterprise of rigging the Conservative Party leadership election to give the members a Hobson's choice between James Cleverly, who is not a squeaky clean guy, and Kemi Badenoch, their preferred candidate. They were engaged in greasing the wheels of the narrative engine that Liz Truss was responsible for the crash of the economy, not the Bank of England. And so they helped to remove her. Now, this was a disturbing revelation. If you don't put much stock in this wide-spanning conspiracy, disturbing revelation came from an anonymous Rishi-supporting MP, so not someone who voted for Truss. They said, quote, "You know Dougie Smith, the shadowy fixer at CCHQ, was about to be sacked by CCHQ the day before Liz fell. They had to go for an HR process. He had been on the payroll of the party for so long." Now, I remember in a Telegraph piece that I covered in my episode on the 31st of July about Smith, where he was compared to the wolf from Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, that an MP had said, you know, sometimes people go snooping around the CCHQ offices and they find these people on the payroll and they start questioning why they're there and they start looking into getting them off. And then all the leads go dead and everyone shuts up and nothing ever changes. I'm sure it's got absolutely nothing to do with the photos that Dougie Smith made wealthy and influential people submit before they could go to his swingers orgies in Mayfair while he was running a Conservative Party think tank. Sure, there's absolutely nothing going there at all, and I would never allege such a thing. But this is quite interesting. Number 10 aide told Nadine on Monday, the 5th of September 2022, 18 days before the mini-budget, in case, again, that you think that this is all just conspiracy theorising, quote, "I can tell you this, they won't be happy with Liz. They will panic her, they will get her out, they will make the wrong moves, they will get Rishi in, and they won't be happy with him either because I can see what they're already up to. If it's Liz who's in, one or all of them who Rishi thinks right now are his new best friends will be trying by any means possible to get a job in number 10, and I think close to Liz. They will already have decided who that is, probably Robbie Gibb. They will work to get Liz out and Rishi in." This was 18 days before the mini-budget. And they were already saying they are going to try and remove Liz. This is clearly revenge for not giving them cabinet positions, for not being the planned candidate, for the members voting against the wishes of the inner party and the financial establishment. They knew it was going to be havoc to the uniparty agenda going on uninterrupted, and so, despite Liz at the time being, let's say, sure, a bull in the economic china shop, but not nearly as wised up to issues like immigration as she is now, she still needed to be removed because she was a stone in the shoe of the establishment on a long march towards what they define as utopia, but what is actually our immiseration and our cultural obliteration. Now, in Out of the Blue, Colin Heal note, prominent cabinet figures such as Michael Gove, Grant Shapps and Sajid Javid had been culled, a decision that would come back to haunt Truss within weeks. I mean, this is why someone told Dorries Michael Gove was cruising around Conservative Party conference attacking Liz Truss to any journalist with a camera who would listen, telling journalists he and Grant Shapps would have her out by Christmas. All you've got to do is pour through these texts and start putting them together. I know it's long and arduous, but it's... The idea that Liz Truss crashed the economy is responsible for all this is absolutely insane. Now, what's interesting here, this all makes sense, that this particular unit is involved with this. Because Dominic Cummings and Michael Gove insisted that the Cabinet Secretary at the time, Sir Mark Sedwill, in 2020, on the 9th of September, was replaced by Simon Cates, by Boris Johnson. Case was appointed by Johnson in December 2021 to oversee the Partygate inquiry. He recused himself on December the 17th due to reports that he had been in a party in his private office. And so, this left the role open for Sue Gray. Sue Gray, who is now, well, having just been removed, I believe, because of the controversy around her salary being higher than Keir Starmer's. Sue Gray, who went from being the Partygate civil servant to Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff and ensuring that her son got a safe Labour seat to become a Labour MP. It's mad how all these people work together. I mean, Dorries has a source on this, says, quote, everywhere Michael Gove goes, Gray goes too. She was also working with Oliver Dowden at the Cabinet Office. Oliver Dowden became the Chief of Staff for the... Was he head of the Conservative Party or Chief Whip under Rishi Sunak's government immediately? He's very close to Gove and is a total puppet of Dougie Smith. Oliver Dowden is part of the extended group. Baroness Simone Finn is an ex-girlfriend and now a close friend of Gove. She was a big fan of Sue Gray and along with Gove pushed Boris to appoint Gray to write the Partygate report. I say pushed, I mean insisted. They're all there. Robbie Gibb has never gone away. He's always just there, hovering around number 10, and all the main players. Follow the links, they're connected. Sue Gray is very happy to swim in those waters. Gove leaps to defend her every time she comes up with a wacky idea in number 10, just like he has leapt to protect Cummings and Dougie Smith many, many times, and Dr. No, too. Dr. No being the pseudonym that now Nadine Dorries has admitted she applied to some of the more outlandish things that Dougie Smith did, because it turns out it was leaked to The Spectator that Dr. No and Dougie Smith are the same person. All the criminal allegations that she pinned on Dr. No and all of the internal party machinations, she had to pseudonymize, but, I mean, Nadine hasn't been sued yet, so... Concerning. There we go. Look how long she's worked with and followed Gove around various government departments or jobs, or Dowden. She was a senior civil servant and part of the gang. The thing about Gove is, there are 4 people in number 10 who over many years he has stuck his neck out to protect and defend and who he'd put his head on the block for. Dr. No, Smith, Cummings, and Sue Gray. And I have often asked myself, why? You'd think I'd made this all up if there weren't sources to hand. I mean, there are more. We'll just wrap up in the last few minutes. Simon Case is now quitting. The reason is he's been diagnosed with a neurological condition and advised to stand down as Cabinet Secretary in 2025. He's been walking with a cane for the last 18 months. Harrowing stuff, fair enough. The deadline for his replacement is being accelerated because he's been arguing with Sue Gray. Why is he? Because he has been unable to prevent stories about Keir Starmer's donations from Lord Alley and all of these free tickets and clothes that the likes of Angela Rayner and Rachel Reeves and Lisa Nandy and Sadiq Khan are getting from getting to the press. So they're angry that he hasn't been sufficiently containing the narrative that is damaging to the Labour Party. So it's not that he was engaged in toppling a sitting Prime Minister, not that he was breaking lockdown rules during Partygate. I mean, Sue Gray herself provided one of the parties with a karaoke machine and is still on a higher paid salary than the Prime Minister and is allowed to oversee the Partygate inquiry. No, it's not about anything on the up and up. It's just that they didn't do damage control effectively enough. Here's a quote. In a sign of how low relations between ministers and Simon Case have sunk, the Cabinet Secretary has been privately accused of failing to get a handle on leaks about donations, funding, clothes for Keir Starmer and his wife, rows involving his Chief of Staff, Sue Gray. It's understood that Cabinet ministers and senior Number 10 officials have become so frustrated with the leaks, including on internal appointments and donations, that they have raised informal complaints in meetings. You can feel the anger in the Cabinet, the spads and civil service rising, one Cabinet source said. Well, why was he not in trouble for his letter being leaked against Liz? Was that part of the plan, to exert external press pressure to get Liz to balk and cave and get out so that they could put their preferred government of the day in? It's obviously all about narrative control, which is why Liz remains the establishment scapegoat and hounded at places like Conservative Party Conference and hacks like led by donkeys. It even got personal. So this is according to Out of the Blue and Dorries The Plot, but here's from Out of the Blue. At least 2 ministers and 4 MPs backing Sunak briefed a number of journalists that Truss was having an affair with an aide and had been subject to formal complaints for, quote, predatory behaviour towards a younger male staff member, and even a far-fetched tale she was battling to contain the public revelation that a sex tape existed of her. A dirty dossier of claims floated around the grubbier parts of Westminster, but never saw the light of day. To his credit, Sunak instructed the most senior team that they were to go nowhere near any personal attacks on Truss's private life and warned that anyone who did would be shown the door. Yeah, because it was bullshit. It was defamatory. Even Sunak knew that this stunk too much to be associated with him and that it would tank his own credibility when it came out that it was wrong. And I've seen people suggest that this was true, even on our side of things. You shouldn't do that because you can just really smear someone's reputation. Like, have we not learned from Me Too by now that when people get falsely accused, like Johnny Depp, it just ruins their lives? There's a source in The Plot that cites this. Over the summer, as we moved into each leadership hustings, I could see they were beginning to have an effect on Liz. She was becoming more and more paranoid, and I asked her why, saying, Liz, they can't hurt you. She said, you have no idea what these people can do. As I warned Boris and Gove, I warned them so many times that he wouldn't believe me. No one ever does. Did they do anything to frighten Liz? Dorries asked. You must know about that dirty dossier about Liz with seriously made-up nasty stuff that was sent around to newspaper editors. We all guessed it was produced by Team Rishi. It's classic Dr. No, Dougie Smith, modus operandi. He used to write them in the style of a CCHQ research document. The thing is, a journalist once showed me one of these supposed research documents on his phone, and at the top was the name of the sender, and it was Dougie Smith. The stuff they put out about Liz, it was mostly sexual, disgusting, and untrue. And Dorries says, I knew about the dossier. Rees-Mogg and I had both heard what was in it, and before we publicly backed Liz in the leadership race, we both went to see her in her office to ask her about it and verify that none of it was true. Liz was very adamant and obviously aware that she was in for a rough and dirty ride. And the dossier was so appalling that when the press didn't use it, it was texted to a journalist that, quote, we're keeping this ammunition for use at a later date. He meant after she had won the leadership election. She was in the job only a week, and then another dirty dossier was released about her husband, Hugh, who is one of the most ordinary, nicest people you can meet. I mean, lovely. He's an accountant and a family man, but he's just a lovely man, and I mean ordinary in the sense of the people we have to put up with in politics. The dirty dossier on Hugh went around Westminster WhatsApps like wildfire. Dr. No, Dougie Smith, sent that around a week after Liz won the leadership contest. He fired a rocket deep into the heart of her family, and it floored her because, as fictitious as it was, she knew it was out there. And look, I'm not going to comment on past marital difficulties that have been publicised between Liz and her husband, because that's absolutely nothing to do with me. But this is what these people are willing to do, the lengths they're willing to go to. They're willing to just lie about your personal sexual misconduct, to break apart your family, to stop you enacting economic and immigration policies they don't want. I mean, genuinely, Liz Truss might be the highest profile cancellation that we've seen. It's brutal. I know Alex Jones was, sued for the GDP of a small country. But this is why they're so angry at her still. It's because she lost the top job in the country. Around the world, her name is known as synonymous with a failed government, and yet she's refused to bow her head. Thank you for watching that clip from Tomlinson Talks. If you liked that and you would like to see more, you can get the full 90-minute show every week on a Wednesday afternoon, live from 3 p.m, only on lotuseaters.com, and all of the other content that my colleagues produce behind the paywall for as little as £5 a month. Thank you very much for supporting us, and I hope to see you there. Until next time, goodbye.